The human ship dropped out of warp exactly where we predicted, and I allowed myself the luxury of a smile. 9 months of intercepted trade route data, 3 weeks of positioning, and 6 days of sitting in the cold sensor shadow of a dead moon had all led to this single moment. The target was here. The trap was set. And I, Veyrak Son, tactical commander of the Dravani 3rd Raider Flotilla, was about to add another clean surrender to my record. I leaned forward in my command chair and studied the holographic display that floated above the central console. The ship was big, Terran Heavy Hauler class, registry designation Cartwright, running a standard freight corridor between the human colony worlds and the outer medical stations. Our intelligence said it was carrying synth organ shipments, the kind of precision-grown biological cargo that fetched obscene prices on the black market. One ship, one haul, enough profit to fund my flotilla for a full cycle. All ships, confirm positions, I said into the fleet channel. 9 voices answered. 9 Dravani strike frigates, each one crewed by veterans who had done this dance dozens of times before. They were spread in a wide arc behind the dead moon, engines cold, running on minimal power to avoid detection. The formation was called the Jaws. 2 clusters of 4 ships, each positioned to sweep in from opposite flanks, with my flagship anchoring the center. When the net closed, the target would find itself surrounded on every axis, with nowhere to run and no hope of fighting through. The freighter has cleared the moon's gravity well, my sensor officer reported. It is proceeding along the predicted corridor at standard cruise speed. No escort detected. No additional vessels within scanning range. No escort. Of course not. Humans were still new to this sector of space, still naive enough to send valuable cargo through contested corridors without military protection. Every other species had learned the hard way that these lanes belonged to the Dravani during off-cycle patrols. The Reshki had learned. The Torvan had learned. The Melisari had learned fastest of all, after we took 3 of their grain convoys in a single season. But humans were stubborn in their ignorance, and their stubbornness was my profit. Spring the trap, I ordered. All 9 ships powered up simultaneously. Engines flared. Weapon systems came online with a hum I could feel through the deck plating. Shields activated. 9 Dravani frigates surged out from behind the dead moon like predators breaking cover, and within 30 seconds, the Cartwright was surrounded. 4 ships above, 4 below, my flagship directly ahead. Every weapons battery in the flotilla locked onto the freighter's hull and painted it with targeting solutions that would have turned it into scattered debris in under 2 seconds if I gave the word. It was, if I may say so, a perfect ambush. The textbooks would have approved. I opened the general broadcast channel and transmitted the standard capitulation demand. I had given this speech so many times that I could recite it in my sleep. Unidentified vessel. This is Commander Veyrak Son of the Dravani 3rd Raider Flotilla. You are surrounded and outgunned. Power down your engines, lower your shields, and prepare to be boarded. Compliance will ensure the safety of your crew. Resistance will result in the destruction of your ship. You have 60 seconds to respond. I settled back in my chair and waited. This was always the part I enjoyed most. The silence between the demand and the surrender, when the target's captain was staring at the sensor display and running the mathematics of survival. 9 warships versus 1 freighter. The equation had only one answer, and every captain in the galaxy knew it. Lieutenant Dresha, my second in command, stood at her station with her arms folded across her chest. She had served with me for 7 years, and had been present for every one of my 47 successful ambushes, 47 operations, 47 surrenders, 0 casualties on either side. I was proud of that record. Other raider commanders were butchers, who left wreckage and bodies in their wake. I was a professional. I took cargo, not lives. My crews were disciplined. My targets were treated with basic respect. And the cargo always ended up where it could generate the most profit. The 60-second timer on my display counted down. 50 seconds. 40. 30. No response from the freighter, my communications officer said. I frowned. That was unusual. Most captains responded within the first 20 seconds, either with a surrender hail or a panic distress beacon. Silence was rare. Not unprecedented, but rare. They may be experiencing a communications malfunction. Dresha suggested. Or their captain may be frozen with fear. It happens with the younger species. Repeat the demand, I said. My communications officer broadcasted again. The words echoed across every frequency the human ship could possibly be monitoring. Surrender or die. Simple, clear, universal. The timer reached 0. And then, finally, the Cartwright responded. It was a single short burst transmission. No video, no identification. Just a tight beam audio signal that my communications officer caught and routed to the bridge speakers. The voice that came through was calm and unhurried, speaking accented Galactic Common, with an ease that suggested the speaker had used the language many times before. Negative. Proceed on your way. I stared at the speaker grill, as if it had just spoken in a language I did not understand. In a sense, it had. No one said negative to a Dravani ambush. The word did not exist in this context. It was like a prey animal looking at a predator and politely declining to be eaten. Repeat that transmission, I said slowly. My communications officer played it again. The same 2 sentences. Negative. Proceed on your way. As if I were a minor inconvenience. A traffic obstruction to be navigated around, rather than a lethal threat with 9 warships aimed at the speaker's hull. Commander, Dresha said, and something in her tone made me turn. She was studying her sensor display with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It took me a moment to identify it. It was uncertainty. The freighter's power signature is fluctuating. Internal systems appear to be reconfiguring. Reconfiguring how? I am not certain. The readings do not match any standard freighter power profile in our database. It is as if the ship is shifting energy from one set of systems to another, but I cannot identify the destination systems. I dismissed it. Freighters had maintenance cycles. Power fluctuations happened. What mattered was that a lone cargo hauler had just refused to surrender to 9 warships, and that refusal needed to be corrected before it became an embarrassment. Charge the forward batteries, I ordered. Warning volley. Low-yield kinetic rounds across the bow. Standard intimidation pattern. My weapons officer executed the order with practiced efficiency. 4 kinetic rounds streaked from my flagship's forward guns, aimed to pass within 100 meters of the Cartwright's bow. Close enough to rattle their hull plating, close enough to make the point that the next volley would not miss. The rounds crossed the distance in less than a second. And then something happened that I had never seen in 15 years of raiding. The freighter's hull shimmered. There was no other word for it. A ripple of energy cascaded across the ship's outer plating, like heat haze rising from hot metal, and my 4 kinetic rounds simply ceased to exist. They did not impact. They did not ricochet. They did not detonate. They hit that shimmer and vanished, as if they had never been fired at all. What was that? I demanded. My weapons officer was already running diagnostics, her hands moving across her console with frantic speed. Commander, the rounds were absorbed by some form of shielding technology. I have no match for the energy signature in our tactical database. It does not correspond to any known shield geometry used by Terran merchant vessels. It does not correspond to any known shield geometry used by anyone, Dresha added quietly. She was staring at her sensor display as if it were lying to her. Commander, the Cartwright's energy signature has just quadrupled. Whatever internal reconfiguration was taking place, it appears to be complete. I watched the holographic display as the numbers climbed. The power output coming from that ship was no longer in the range of a heavy hauler. It was not even in the range of a military frigate. It was climbing past destroyer class, past cruiser class, into territory that my sensors could barely quantify. And then the Cartwright began to turn. It did not flee. It did not try to break through our formation. It simply rotated on its central axis, slowly and deliberately, until its bow was pointing directly at my flagship. The movement was unhurried, patient, the kind of turn a predator makes when it decides to stop watching and start hunting. Commander, my weapons officer said, and her voice had gone very quiet. I am detecting weapons ports opening along the freighter's flanks, dozens of them. They were hidden behind retractable hull plating. The temperature on my bridge seemed to drop. I could feel it in the silence of my crew, in the way every officer had stopped moving and was staring at the same display. The Cartwright's silhouette was changing. Panels were sliding back along its hull, revealing row after row of weapon emplacements that had been concealed beneath what we had taken for standard cargo plating. The ship was unfolding like something alive, shedding its skin to reveal what lay beneath. I looked at that display, and for the first time in 47 ambushes, I felt the cold finger of doubt press against the base of my skull. Something was very, very wrong. The silence on my bridge lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds of every officer staring at sensor readings that contradicted everything we thought we knew about the ship in front of us. Then the Cartwright transmitted again, and this time, the signal included video. The display above my command console flickered, and a human face appeared. Female. Dark hair pulled back tight. A face built from sharp angles and calm eyes that held exactly zero fear. She wore a uniform I did not recognize. It was not the standard merchant marine livery that Terran cargo crews wore. It was darker, more structured, military. "Commander Veyrak Son," she said, and the fact that she knew my name sent a spike of ice through my chest. "My name is Commander Lena Vasic, Terran Naval Reserve, attached to the Commerce Protection Directorate. The vessel you are currently threatening is not a freighter. It is a Q-ship, a warship designed to look like a merchant vessel. It was deployed along this corridor specifically because your flotilla has been raiding human supply lines for the past 11 months. She paused to let that land. It landed hard. "I am now going to make you a counteroffer," she continued. "Power down your weapon systems. Transmit your flotilla's command authorization codes. Prepare your ships for escort to the nearest Terran naval processing station. If you comply, your crews will be treated humanely and processed under interstellar commerce protection statutes. If you do not comply, I will disable your flotilla by force. You have 60 seconds to respond." She delivered the entire speech the way someone might read a list of ingredients. No anger, no satisfaction, no dramatic emphasis. Just a series of facts presented in order. I stared at her image and felt my jaw tighten. A Q-ship. I had heard rumors about such things. Ships that wore the skin of merchants but carried the teeth of warships, deployed by naval forces to hunt pirates in disguise. I had dismissed those rumors as propaganda, designed to make raiders hesitate. I was no longer dismissing them. But the mathematics had not changed. 9 warships against 1, regardless of what that one was hiding under its hull, was still 9 against 1. A single ship could not fight 9 simultaneously. It could not cover every angle, track every target, and deflect every volley at once. Physics did not work that way. I opened the fleet channel. "All ships, attack formation Kresh 7. Full assault. Coordinate fire on the target's engine section. We overwhelm it, and we cripple it. Move now." 8 acknowledgements came back instantly. My captains were veterans. They did not hesitate. They did not question. They simply executed. The flotilla surged forward in a practiced pattern. 4 ships diving below the Cartwright's keel, while 4 more swept above, each pair converging from a different vector to divide the target's defensive fire. My flagship held position at range, directing the assault. "All ships, fire at will," I commanded. The first volley was everything we had. Kinetic rounds, plasma torpedoes, directed energy beams. 7 ships unleashing their full armament in a coordinated storm of destruction aimed at a single target. The space around the Cartwright lit up with the flash of impacts, as hundreds of projectiles and energy beams converged on its hull from every direction. The barrage lasted 12 seconds. 12 seconds of sustained maximum firepower from 7 warships. When the last round was fired and the sensors began to clear, I leaned forward and waited for the damage report. The Cartwright was still there. Its shields were still active. Its hull was undamaged. It had not even altered course. But before I could process that, the Q-ship fired back. Not a broadside. Not a full volley. Just 2 shots. 2 precisely aimed energy beams that lanced out from the Cartwright's forward batteries with a speed that my tactical computers barely registered. The first beam hit the frigate commanded by Captain Sorville on my outer flank. It struck the ship's engine section with pinpoint accuracy, and every system on Sorville's vessel went dark simultaneously. Engines dead, weapons offline, shields collapsed, life support on backup. The ship went from a fully operational warship to a drifting hulk in less than a second, and it happened so cleanly that for a moment, I thought my sensors were malfunctioning. The second beam hit the frigate beside Sorval's. Same target area, same result. Another warship reduced to a powerless shell in the time it took me to blink. 2 ships disabled, 2 shots fired. Elapsed time, 8 seconds. I sat in my command chair and stared at the display, as the reality of what I was witnessing sank into my bones. The Cartwright had absorbed the combined firepower of 7 warships without flinching, and then it had surgically killed 2 of my ships with the casual precision of a surgeon removing a splinter. Not destroyed, killed in the operational sense, every system dark, every weapon silenced. The crews were alive. I could see life sign readings on my sensors, but their ships would never fight again without a full refit at a military dock. My weapons officer turned to look at me. Her face was a color I had never seen on a Dravani before. Pale, bloodless. She said 5 words that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. "Commander, I do not think we can hurt it." And in that moment, sitting in the captain's chair of my flagship, with 7 remaining ships and a predator staring me down, I finally understood something that every prey animal in the galaxy already knew. The mathematics had changed. I did not waste time on denial. 15 years of command had taught me many things, and the most important was knowing when a situation had shifted beyond recovery. My flotilla had fired everything we had at the Cartwright and achieved nothing. The Q-ship had returned fire with 2 shots and removed 2 of my ships from the fight as easily as someone brushing dust from their shoulder. The disparity was not a gap. It was a canyon. "All ships, break and scatter," I ordered. "Retreat protocol Veshon. Every vessel makes for a different warp point. Regroup at the fallback coordinates in 48 hours. Protocol Veshon was our emergency dissolution maneuver. 9 ships fleeing in 9 different directions toward 9 different warp points at maximum speed. The logic was simple and had never failed us. No single pursuer, no matter how powerful, could chase 9 targets running in 9 directions simultaneously. You might lose 1 ship to pursuit, maybe 2, but the rest would escape, and the flotilla would survive to fight another day. My remaining 7 ships acknowledged and broke formation instantly. They scattered like startled birds, each one burning hard for a different edge of the system. My own ship, the Verath, swung onto a heading for the nearest warp point, a jump corridor that would take us deep into neutral space where no human patrol would follow. For 10 seconds, I believed we were going to make it. Then the Cartwright's hull began to open. I watched on the aft sensor display as concealed bays along the Q-ship's spine slid apart, and from within those bays, something emerged. Small shapes, fast shapes, dozens of them pouring out of the Cartwright, like insects boiling from a hive. My sensor officer identified them within seconds. Autonomous intercept drones. I count 42 launched. They are accelerating to pursuit speed. 42 drones. I watched them on the tactical display as they spread out in a perfect fan pattern, each one locking onto a different target. Not random, not chaotic. Each drone selected a specific fleeing frigate and committed to it with single-minded precision. 7 frigates, 7 drones apiece, with a reserve wing holding formation around the Cartwright itself. The Q-ship did not need to chase 9 ships in 9 directions. It had brought enough hunters to chase every single one. The fleet channel erupted. Captain Morvesh on Frigate 3 was the first to report contact. His drone caught up to him within 90 seconds, matching his speed with an ease that suggested his engines at maximum output were merely a comfortable cruise for the machine pursuing him. The drone did not fire. Instead, it closed to point-blank range, latched onto Frigate 3's hull with magnetic clamps, and injected something through the plating. Morvesh's voice cut out mid-sentence. His ship's transponder went dark. Every system aboard Frigate 3 flatlined simultaneously. The same surgical kill we had witnessed before, but delivered by a drone no larger than a shuttle. Frigate 3 is disabled, my sensor officer reported. Crew life signs are stable. The ship is intact but completely without power. I gripped the arms of my command chair and stared at the tactical display as the same scene began to play out across the entire system. Frigate 5 tried to fight. Captain Hellick turned her ship to face her pursuing drone, and opened fire with everything she had. Her gunners scored direct hits. I watched the drone absorb kinetic rounds and energy beams without slowing, its outer shell glowing from the impacts but regenerating faster than the damage could accumulate. The drone reached Frigate 5, latched on, and delivered the same systems kill charge. Helix's ship went dark. Frigate 7's captain attempted surrender. He broadcast on all channels, declaring his intent to comply with Terran demands. The drone pursuing him slowed, matched his speed, and then disabled his ship with what I can only describe as gentleness. The system's kill charge was delivered at low intensity, shutting down weapons and propulsion, but leaving life support and communications intact. Then a recorded message played through Frigate 7's speakers, a human voice speaking calm galactic common. Surrender accepted. Remain powered down and maintain current position. You will be collected for processing. Do not attempt to restore weapons or propulsion systems. One by one, my flotilla died. Not in fire and debris, but in silence. Each ship went dark on my tactical display like stars winking out at dawn. I listened to my captains on the fleet channel as they reported contact, reported pursuit, reported the futility of resistance, and then went silent. Captain Torvain on Frigate 6 lasted the longest, nearly 4 minutes, because his ship was the fastest in the flotilla, and he pushed his engines until the reactor housing began to crack. The drone caught him anyway. It caught him the way gravity catches a stone. And through it all, the Cartwright sat motionless at the center of the system, a spider at the hub of a web, watching its drones methodically dismantle the most successful raider flotilla in Dravani history. My own ship ran hard. The Varath's engines were screaming at 112% of rated capacity, a level my chief engineer had specifically told me would cause catastrophic failure within 20 minutes. I did not care. The warp point was 17 minutes away at this speed. I could make it. I had to make it. The drone behind me kept pace without effort. I could see it on the aft sensors, holding steady at 800 meters behind my ship, matching every course correction and speed change with machine precision. It was not firing. It was not closing the gap. It was simply following, patient and relentless, like a hunting animal that knows its prey will tire before it does. Commander, the reactor temperature is approaching critical thresholds, my engineer reported. If we maintain this speed for more than 12 additional minutes, we risk a containment breach. Maintain speed, I said. Commander, a containment breach at this reactor output would destroy the ship. I heard you. Maintain speed. Dresha moved to stand beside my chair. She said nothing. She simply stood there, steady and present, the way she had stood beside me through 7 years and 47 operations. I could feel her looking at me, but I did not meet her eyes. I could not afford to see whatever was in them. The warp point grew closer on the navigation display. 14 minutes. 12. 10. The reactor temperature climbed. The hull plating along the engine section began to glow from the waste heat. Warning alarms sounded and were silenced. The drone behind me maintained its distance. 800 meters. Never closer. Never farther. Patient. 8 minutes to the warp point. I allowed myself a fragment of hope. Then my sensor officer spoke, and the fragment shattered. Commander, I am detecting a second vessel at the warp point coordinates. It dropped out of warp 40 seconds ago and is holding position directly on the jump threshold. I looked at the display. The ship sitting on my escape route was not a Q ship. It was not disguised as anything. It was a Terran naval destroyer, full military configuration, weapons hot, shields active, sitting on the warp point like a guard standing in a doorway. Its transponder identified it as the TNS Harlan County. The drone behind me began to close the gap. Not aggressively, gradually. It was hurting me, pushing me toward the destroyer the way a shepherd's dog drives livestock toward a gate. Every slight course correction I made to avoid the Harlan County was matched by the drone shifting its position to cut off the new heading. It was not chasing me, it was steering me. And in that moment, sitting in my command chair with a destroyer ahead, and a drone behind, and the wreckage of my certainty scattered across the system, I understood what had happened. We had not ambushed the humans. The humans had ambushed us. The Q ship in the trade corridor, disguised as a helpless freighter. The drones hidden in its hull, enough to pursue every ship in my flotilla simultaneously. The destroyer waiting at the warp point, positioned before my ships even began to flee. This was not a response to our attack. This was a planned operation, conceived and executed with a level of tactical sophistication that made my own ambush look like children playing at war. We were the predators who had walked into a trap set by something higher on the food chain. And we had walked in smiling. "Cut engines," I said. The bridge went quiet. My crew stared at me. "Commander," Dresha said, "cut the engines, power down weapons, lower shields." I took a breath and released my grip on the chair's armrests. My fingers ached from how tightly I had been holding on. "We are done." The Varath's engines died. The weapons went cold. The shields dropped. We drifted in silence, momentum carrying us forward on a trajectory that would bring us within range of the Harlan County in approximately 6 minutes. The drone behind us matched our deceleration and held position, close enough to strike, but making no move to do so. We sat in the dark and waited. The drone did not disable us. It simply held station, watching, until the Harlan County moved forward and locked us in a tractor beam. The destroyer's systems took hold of my ship with a firmness that left no room for argument, and the Varath was drawn gently, almost tenderly, toward the larger vessel's docking bay. I looked at the tactical display one final time. 9 Dravani frigates, all dark, all disabled or captured, all crew alive. Not one of my people had been killed. Not one of the human weapons had been set to lethal intensity. They had dismantled my entire flotilla with the precision of a surgeon and the restraint of someone who considered killing to be beneath them. The docking clamps engaged, and the Varath shuddered as it settled into the Harlan County's hold. I stood from my command chair, straightened my uniform, and turned to face the airlock. "What do we do?" Dresha asked. "We cooperate," I said, "and we try to understand what just happened to us." The airlock opened, and the humans came aboard. There were 12 of them, armored in close-fitting tactical suits that covered them from neck to boot, carrying weapons that were holstered but accessible, moving with the coordinated efficiency of a team that had done this many times before. They did not shout. They did not threaten. They did not point their weapons at my crew. They simply entered the bridge, took up positions at every exit, and began a systematic process that I recognized because I had performed some version of it myself on 47 occasions. They were securing a captured vessel. The team leader approached me. He was tall for a human, broad across the shoulders, with a face that held the same calm competence I had seen in Commander Vasik's transmission. He identified himself as Lieutenant Gareth Cole, Terran Naval Reserve, Boarding Operations. "Commander Sohn," he said in passable Galactic Common, "your crew will not be harmed. We are going to conduct a standard boarding procedure. Weapons will be confiscated. All personnel will be biometrically scanned and logged. Any injuries will be treated by our medical team. Do you have wounded aboard?" I told him we did not, apart from a junior officer named Kesev, who had broken his arm when the ship lurched during our failed escape. Lieutenant Cole nodded and spoke into his communicator. Within 3 minutes, a human medic was on the bridge. She examined Kesev's arm, applied a temporary splint with quick and gentle hands, and gave him an injection for the pain. She smiled at him while she worked. Kesev looked at me with an expression of pure confusion, as if being treated with kindness by his captors was a concept his mind could not process. I understood his confusion. I shared it. The boarding team moved through my ship with methodical precision. They confiscated every weapon, logged every crew member, and secured every compartment. They were thorough but not rough. When one of my gunners resisted the confiscation of his sidearm, the human who disarmed him did so with a wrist lock that was firm enough to control and gentle enough to leave no bruise. The gunner was told, politely, that his weapon would be catalogued and returned to the Dravani government after adjudication. The gunner stared at the human as if he had just spoken in a dead language. Then Commander Vasik arrived. She was shorter than I expected. On the video transmission, she had projected an authority that made me assume she was physically imposing. In person, she barely reached my chest. But there was something in the way she carried herself, a density of presence that had nothing to do with size. that made every Dravani on the bridge straighten involuntarily when she walked in. She carried a data tablet. She did not carry a weapon. "Commander Sohn," she said, and her galactic common was flawless. "I need to review your flotilla's operational logs for the past 11 months. My technical team has already accessed your ship's main computer, but I would prefer your voluntary cooperation. It will make the adjudication process significantly smoother for your crew." "Adjudication for what, exactly?" I asked. "For the seizure or destruction of 43 Terran merchant vessels over the past 11 months, she said. "For the theft of approximately 600 million credits worth of cargo, including medical supplies, agricultural equipment, and emergency relief shipments. And for the downstream consequences of those thefts." "Downstream consequences?" She looked at me with those calm, sharp eyes, and for the first time I saw something behind them. Not anger, something colder, something more controlled. "The synth organ shipment you intercepted 6 months ago," she said. "Registry number TF4419. Do you remember it?" I did. It had been one of our largest hauls. Medical-grade synthetic organs, enough to fill 3 cargo bays. We had sold them to a Melisari broker for a fortune. "That shipment was bound for a colony called New Carrick," Vasek continued. 14,000 colonists. They were experiencing an outbreak of Koresh syndrome, a degenerative organ disease that is completely treatable with synthetic organ replacement. The shipment you stole contained the replacements for 216 patients, including 41 children under the age of 10. She paused, not for dramatic effect. She paused the way someone pauses when they are making sure the next words come out precisely right. 87 of those patients died before a replacement shipment could be manufactured and delivered. 31 of them were children. The bridge was silent. I could hear the hum of the Harlan County systems through the hull. I could hear Kesev's breathing, shallow and quick from the pain medication. I could hear my own heartbeat. "You did not fire a weapon at those people," Vasek said. "You did not intend their deaths. But they are dead, and the cargo that would have saved them was in your hold when they died. That is the downstream consequence I am referring to." She did not raise her voice. She did not lean forward. She did not make any gesture that could be interpreted as threatening or emotional. She simply stated facts in the same tone she might use to read a navigational chart, and the facts were devastating precisely because of how calmly they were delivered. I had built my career on the principle of clean piracy. No casualties, no violence. Take the cargo, release the crew, move on. I had told myself, and told my officers, that we were professionals, operating in a morally gray area, not different from tax collectors or customs officials skimming from the system. I had never asked what happened to the cargo after we took it. I had never asked because I did not want to know the answer. The answer was standing in front of me now, 5 feet 2 inches tall, holding a data tablet with the names of 31 dead children on it. I looked at Dresha. She was standing very still, her hands at her sides, her face composed in the careful blankness that I had learned over 7 years, meant she was feeling something she did not want others to see. When she met my eyes, she did not look away, but she did not speak either. "What are you thinking?" I asked her quietly, in our own language. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, in the same language, "I am thinking about what we told ourselves, Commander, and how easy it was to believe it." Vasek waited. She did not interrupt our exchange, did not demand a translation, did not rush us. She simply stood with her data tablet and waited for us to finish processing what she had told us. "What are your terms?" I asked. "Your flotilla will be escorted to a Terran-administered processing station in the Brevik system. Your crews will be identified, logged, and held for adjudication under the Interstellar Commerce Protection Statutes, which your government is a signatory to. Your ships will be impounded as evidence. The process will take approximately 4 to 6 weeks. And after adjudication? That depends on several factors, including the level of cooperation provided by you and your officers, and the disposition of the adjudicating panel. I will not make predictions about the outcome. Will my crew be harmed? No. The answer was immediate and unequivocal. No hesitation, no qualification, no conditional clauses. Just the word, delivered with a certainty that I believed despite every instinct telling me that captors could not be trusted. There is one more thing you should know, Vasek added. The Cartwright is not the only Q-ship deployed in this sector. The Terran Naval Reserve has placed vessels along every known raider corridor between here and the outer boundary. Every ambush your people attempt from this point forward will end the same way this one did. She paused. The era of easy predation is over, Commander. She turned and left the bridge. Lieutenant Cole and his boarding team remained, professional and calm, waiting for us to be transferred to the Harlan County's holding section. I stood on my own bridge, surrounded by humans who had beaten me completely, and chosen not to hurt me, and tried to understand the species I was dealing with. I had studied humans before this operation. I had read the intelligence briefs. I knew their approximate military capabilities, their trade patterns, their colonial expansion rate. I had thought I understood them the way I understood any other prey species in the sector. I understood nothing. The transfer to the Harlan County took 3 hours. My crew was moved in groups of 10, escorted by human security teams who maintained a level of courtesy that bordered on the surreal. We were not bound. We were not shoved. We were guided through the destroyer's corridors and shown to holding cells that were, I noticed with a discomfort I could not fully articulate, cleaner and better lit than the crew quarters on my own ship. Each cell had a bunk, a sanitation facility, a small table, and a reading terminal loaded with entertainment content in multiple languages, including Dravani. There was a call button for requesting assistance. The door locked from the outside, but the interior lighting, temperature, and ventilation were controllable from within. I sat on my bunk in the artificial quiet and stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of what had happened to me. Not the tactical defeat. That I could understand, even accept. I had been outmaneuvered by a superior force. It happened. What I could not accept, what I could not fit into any framework I possessed, was the manner of that defeat. The restraint, the precision, the deliberate, systematic choice to capture rather than destroy. Every species I knew, including my own, treated military victory as an opportunity for dominance. You won, and then you demonstrated what winning meant. You took trophies. You humiliated the defeated. You made examples that would discourage future resistance. That was how power worked. That was how the galaxy worked. The humans had won, and then they had offered medical treatment for my injured officer and given me a cell with adjustable lighting. On the second day of our transit to the processing station, I spoke with one of the guards. He was a young human, not much older than my youngest crew members, with a round face and quick eyes. His rank was petty officer, and his name was Dao. He was assigned to the corridor outside my cell, and during his shifts, he would sometimes pause at my door and ask if I needed anything. Water, food, a different selection on the reading terminal. The first few times I ignored him, certain that the courtesy was a prelude to some form of interrogation or manipulation. By the third time, curiosity overcame suspicion. "Why did you not destroy us?" I asked. Dao looked at me with what I can only describe as genuine puzzlement. The question seemed to confuse him, as if I had asked why water was wet or why stars produced light. "Why would we destroy you?" he said. "You had the capability. We attacked you. In most military doctrines, that would justify lethal response." He thought about it for a moment, and I could see him formulating his answer with care. "Our doctrine does not prioritize destruction," he said. "It prioritizes resolution. If we can disable a threat without killing anyone, that is considered the superior outcome. Destroying a crewed vessel when capture is operationally feasible is regarded as a failure of skill, not a display of strength." I let that settle into my mind. A failure of skill. In Dravani military culture, the ability to annihilate an enemy was the highest form of martial achievement. A commander who obliterated a foe was celebrated. A commander who showed restraint was considered weak. For humans, the calculus was inverted. Destruction was easy, and therefore unimpressive. Restraint was difficult, and therefore valued. "You do not consider us enemies?" I asked. "You attacked our ships and stole our cargo," Dao said. "That makes you criminals, not enemies." There is a difference. Enemies require military solutions. Criminals require legal ones. And if we had been enemies? Dao's expression shifted slightly. The friendliness was still there, but underneath it, I glimpsed something else. Something harder. If you had been enemies, he said carefully, the Cartwright would not have been a Q-ship, it would have been a strike cruiser, and this conversation would not be happening. He moved on to continue his patrol, and I sat in my cell and thought about the distinction between criminals and enemies, and about what it meant to be classified as the former by a species that had the power to treat you as the latter. Over the following days, I learned more from Dao, and from the other guards, and from the reading terminal in my cell. I learned that my flotilla was not the first to be caught by the Q-ship program. Over the previous 3 months, the Terran Naval Reserve had deployed disguised warships along every major raider corridor in the sector, and those ships had intercepted 14 separate raider groups, spanning 7 different species. Every single group had made the same mistake we did. They saw a lone human ship and assumed it was prey. Every single group received the same surgical disabling and the same professional processing. 14 ambushes, 14 failures, 0 fatalities on either side. The humans had turned the entire raider corridor network into a trap, and they had done it without killing a single person. On the 4th day of transit, I was allowed to observe a live feed of a session at the Galactic Commerce Authority, the interstellar body that regulated trade and shipping across the sector. Commander Vasek was presenting the results of the Q-ship program to representatives of 32 species in the main assembly chamber. I watched from a viewing terminal in the Harlan County's recreation area, flanked by 2 guards who seemed more interested in the presentation than in watching me. Vasek stood at the central podium, small and precise, and laid out the data with the same clinical efficiency she had used on my bridge. She showed footage of 14 ambushes, 14 raider groups, confident and aggressive, closing on what they believed to be defenseless human cargo ships, 14 Q-ships dropping their disguises, 14 flotillas disabled with surgical precision. The footage was not edited for drama. It did not need to be. Watching ship after ship, species after species, make the same catastrophic miscalculation and suffer the same methodical defeat was more compelling than any propaganda reel could have been. She presented data on recovered cargo, hundreds of shipments returned to their intended recipients, medical supplies that reached colony worlds weeks or months late, but still in time to save lives, agricultural equipment that arrived at frontier settlements before the growing season ended, emergency relief packages that made it through to disaster zones that had been cut off by raider activity. She presented the names of the colonies that had suffered from delayed shipments. She presented casualty figures where delays had cost lives. She presented all of it without emotion, without accusation, without any rhetorical flourish. Just data, just truth, just the plain, documented consequences of what raiders like me had been doing for years while telling ourselves it was victimless. The chamber was silent when she finished. 32 species, many of whom had been victims of the same raider corridors we operated in, stared at the footage with an expression I recognized. It was the same expression I had worn when the Cartwright's shields absorbed my entire flotilla's firepower without flickering. Not fear, not anger, recognition. The recognition that the rules of the game had changed, and that the entity changing them was operating at a level none of them had fully appreciated. I watched a Reshki ambassador lean over to a Torvan delegate and whisper something. I could not hear what was said, but I could read the body language. It was the body language of someone who had just realized that the quiet neighbor they had been underestimating was not quiet because they were weak. The presentation ended. The feed cut. I sat in the recreation area of a Terran destroyer and stared at the blank screen and thought about what I had just witnessed. The obliteration. Not physical obliteration. My ships were not destroyed. My crew was alive. My own body was unharmed, sitting in a chair that was reasonably comfortable, having eaten a meal that was, to my private and enduring shame, better than anything my flotilla's galley had ever produced. The obliteration was something else. It was the destruction of every assumption I had built my life upon. The assumption that intimidation was power, that numbers guaranteed dominance, that the galaxy was divided into those who took and those who were taken from, and that cleverness determined which category you fell into. The humans had shown me a different kind of power. Not the power to destroy, although they clearly possessed that in abundance. The power to choose not to. The power to defeat an enemy so completely and so surgically that not a single life was lost, and then to process that enemy through a legal system rather than a furnace. The power to hold back the fist when the fist could have fallen without consequence. I had spent my career believing that restraint was weakness, that mercy was a luxury afforded by those who could not afford strength. The humans had more strength than any species I had ever encountered, and they used it the way a master craftsman uses a precision tool. Not to smash, to shape. The Harlan County arrived at the processing station the following morning. I was escorted from my cell to a transfer shuttle, and from the shuttle to a processing center that was clean, organized, and staffed by humans and members of several other species working together with bureaucratic efficiency. I was photographed, scanned, interviewed, and assigned a case number. My personal effects were cataloged and stored. I was given clean clothing and shown to a holding suite that was, again, nicer than my quarters on my own ship. The adjudicator was a human woman named Judge Ellen Harper. She was older than Vasek, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes that suggested she had been doing this work for a long time. She reviewed my case file on a tablet and then looked at me across the table. "Commander Sohn, do you have anything to say before we proceed with the formal adjudication process?" I looked at her. I looked at the guard standing by the door, calm and professional. I looked at the room, clean and well lit, designed not for intimidation, but for the orderly administration of justice. I thought about the dead moon where I had set my trap. I thought about the smile I had allowed myself when the Cartwright dropped out of warp. I thought about 47 successful ambushes and the quiet pride I had taken in my bloodless record. I thought about 31 children on a colony called New Carrick, who died because the medicine that would have saved them was in my cargo hold when they needed it. And I thought about Commander Vasek, 5 feet 2 inches tall, giving me 60 seconds to surrender, in the same tone I had used to give the Cartwright 60 seconds to comply. The symmetry of it. The deliberate, pointed symmetry. "I came to that corridor expecting a sheep," I said slowly. "I found something that had been watching me hunt for months. Something that had mapped every route I used, predicted every move I would make, and built a trap so complete that I did not even realize I was inside it until the door had already closed. It disabled my entire flotilla without taking a single life. It captured my ships, treated my crew with dignity, and brought me here to answer for what I have done." I paused. The adjudicator waited. "The obliteration was not in the ambush," I said. "It was not in the weapons or the drones, or the destroyer at the warp point. The obliteration was in the silence afterward, in the moment when I realized that the humans could have killed every last one of us, and they chose not to. Not because they were unable, not because they were afraid of the consequences, because they had decided, as a matter of policy and principle, that killing us was unnecessary." I took a breath. That is the most terrifying kind of power in the galaxy. Not the willingness to destroy. The certainty that you can, paired with the discipline to stop. I spent my entire career believing I understood strength. I understood nothing, and I am ready to answer for what I did while I was ignorant. The adjudicator made a note on her tablet. The guard stood by the door. The lights hummed overhead. And somewhere out in the raider corridors, I knew, another Q-ship was drifting through the dark, wearing the skin of a helpless freighter, waiting for the next predator to make the same mistake I had made. I wondered how many of them would understand what I now understood. I wondered how many of them would need to be shown.